Bitcoin cracked you open and led to a paradigm shift in consciousness?
There was something about the Bitcoin journey, going down the rabbit hole and starting to ask deeper questions about why this thing even matters. It takes you into some of the things that you need to understand as far as how society works and some of our basic assumptions over a number of years that led to some deep insights about myself and the way that I view the world.
People are so focused on price charts and monetary policy, but they're failing to see just how huge this is. If you want to understand the universe, you have to understand yourself. The wars that we're seeing out in the world, they mirror the same wars that are happening inside of us.
What I've found is whenever I'm disturbed by something and pointing my fingers out there, it's because I'm not wanting to recognize that inside of me.
Today's guest is Matt Manning, a powerful voice at the intersection of Bitcoin and spiritual awakening. His insights reveal how Bitcoin isn't just changing money, it's transforming consciousness. Matt, welcome to the show. It's such an honor to have you here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Really looking forward to it.
You've said that Bitcoin cracked you open and led to a paradigm shift in consciousness. And that's such a powerful phrase, and I resonate with that deeply. Can you share what that experience was like for you and what started to shift after you had that moment?
Yeah, for sure. It's a really good question. There's a lot to that question. And obviously, in a short conversation,
Yeah.
you can't get to the depth of everything that entails because that's a lot of deep work and a lot of shifts. But yeah, generally speaking, there was something about the Bitcoin journey in discovering Bitcoin, going down the rabbit hole and starting to ask deeper questions about why this thing even matters and where it takes you into some of the things that you need to understand as far as how society works and some of our basic assumptions and things that we've been taught that just are the way they are. So that shifted a lot of those narratives for me. And I had to admit that, oh, some of my assumptions are wrong, or maybe wrong's not the right word, just not as I had thought they were, or not as I had been taught. There's a different perspective. And yeah, it caused me to start making deeper questions about, okay, what else is there that I just take for granted? I take as truth or I take as just how things are that maybe isn't the way it seems. And so I started to question a lot of that. And yeah, over a number of years, that led to some deep insights about myself and the way that I view the world through a certain set of orange glasses, as they say. And there's a perspective, and that led to some pretty profound changes in the way I view the world, just, yeah, broadly.
Yeah, I love hearing your story because you basically are able to explain this process that I'm feeling and that I think a lot of people are feeling, but you explain it in such a great way and you're really tapped into what I think is the most important part of Bitcoin. And it really blows me away that what you're talking about is not being talked about more. People are so focused on price charts and monetary policy, but they're failing to see just how huge this is. But you're touching on that, and I'm just so attuned to the frequency that you're on.
Yeah, thanks. And I don't want to discount, I got into Bitcoin for the price charts and
Yeah,
for number
yeah,
go
yeah.
up. Like when I got in, it was just like, I'm going to throw some money into this and I'm going to hold it for 5 years just as a
Mhm.
speculative investment, see what happens. And the goal was to make more money. So that's how I got in. So I don't want to discount that that's important. And that's many times that's the gateway for people to come into it is like this selfish reason to make more money and to have the number go way up. And yeah, the deeper you go into it, I'm fascinated by that question. What is it about Bitcoin that changes people? And I don't think it's just Bitcoin. I think there's different avenues for this, but Bitcoin is a powerful example of a paradigm shift. And in a lot of ways, it's an ego test. You have to admit that you were wrong, and that's like confronting and challenging to admit. And yeah, I'm starting to see parallels between kind of the Bitcoiner journey and the consciousness journey generally, and yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah, you mentioned in one of your podcasts about why it seems like people in the spiritual consciousness community, when they start to study Bitcoin, they're able to get it more quickly than someone not in that community. And can you expand on why you think that is?
Yeah, it's interesting. Some people, Bitcoin, like me, Bitcoin was the gateway into a more spiritual awakening. And for whatever reason, I think it was just the fact of it being such a paradigm shift that made me open to other paradigm shifts that are just so different, so radically different than the way we're conditioned to see the world. And so other people that have maybe gone the opposite direction, like I've spoken with a number of people who have been into meditation, consciousness, spirituality, non-duality, deep esoteric Eastern teachings and human transformation and inner work. And they've had those paradigm shifts on their own, kind of as far as what day-to-day reality looks like. And for those people, for whatever reason, once they start to ask the questions in Bitcoin, I think they start to see those same parallels of, oh, yeah, there's something archetypal here, there's a pattern, and it shifts their view. And I think just people that have had those types of paradigm shifts that like shatter everything about your previous worldview are more open to those types of things in the future. And Bitcoin certainly is one of those things that it's a rabbit hole that shatters all your previous assumptions. So yeah, I think that's probably why. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts too.
Yeah. When I first got exposed to this overlap between the spiritual community and Bitcoin was at a local Bitcoin meetup. There was a woman who came in and she had no background in finance. She wasn't into crypto or wasn't into Bitcoin at all. But during one of her spiritual sessions with the group that she was in, the leader of the group had basically told everyone in the group that you guys need to start studying Bitcoin because it's going to be play a fundamental role in this global awakening that's happening right now. So she
Hmm.
came to a meetup to learn about it, and she was just so curious. And it kind of mirrors what you said when you told your one of your spiritual mentors. I think you said he works at the Harvard Divinity School. You told him about Bitcoin, and he had no idea what it was, but all you had to do was just tell him some of the basics about it, and he was like, "Yeah, it sounds like that Bitcoin thing you're telling me about is had to come along at this time in order for humanity to upshift to the next level." So it's incredible how Bitcoin came along at the time that it did, and how it's helping guide us to these higher levels of consciousness.
Yeah, yeah. My mentor, teacher, and friend Thomas McConkey is who I was talking about. He was studying at Harvard Divinity School, doing a master's, studying states and stages of consciousness and how adults continue to develop into new perspectives and holding more complexity as an evolutionary process. And in his studies, he's gotten me really into those same models. I'm really interested in this idea of how we develop not only as individuals, but collectively as a society as a whole, as one body and one humanity in this evolutionary process. And in his kind of, he's an expert in those types of models. And I gave him a basic explanation of Bitcoin, 30 minutes. And that was his response was like, oh, yeah, I don't know anything about Bitcoin crypto other than what you've just told me and reading a few news articles over the years. But I can see exactly in these models, like for humanity to be able to move up to the next paradigm inside of this model, why something like that would necessarily have to emerge. Because, yeah, in these models, you start to see that all of the things that got us to where we were, whether that's as an individual or as a collective, those things serve their purpose and they're good. They're not inherently like bad. And there's a time and a place where like those old structures have to fall away for something new to be able to emerge. And so in that lens, like as scary as it is for the known and all of our, habits and conditioning and all the structures, I see it in my personal life. Like to evolve into a new state and a new stage of viewing the world is like profoundly disorienting because it's so unknown and all of the things that you've built your identity around start to crumble and fall away. And you see what emerges on the other side of that. And you start to see it in the collective whole. Yeah, what we're going through right now, there's so much potential. And it's so scary because all the structures that we've built for society to get through the Industrial Revolution to get us to where we are, all of a sudden don't work as well in this pace of the internet and technology and the complexity of this interconnected global landscape. And it's all got to have to fall away. And yeah, necessarily we need new systems to emerge. And I think Bitcoin plays a big part in that.
Yeah, I absolutely love how you connect what's going on internally with what's going on externally in the world. And you said that if you want to understand the universe, you have to understand yourself. And you've also said that the wars that we're seeing out in the world, they mirror the same wars that are happening inside of us. And can you, that's such a profound idea. Can you unpack what you mean by that? And so, how does inner work connect to the state of the world?
Yeah, there's a tendency whenever we see something out in the world, hate, something negative that like we react to, some piece of news of people fighting, arguing, and we point out there, oh, the world is so evil. There's so much, all this bad stuff going on and fighting, and we're killing each other. And objectively, that's true on some level. And what I've found is whenever I'm disturbed by something and pointing my fingers out there, it's because I'm like not wanting to recognize that inside of me. And as I've gone through this journey of awakening, a spiritual awakening, I've realized that there's so many parts of me and these different voices and emotions inside of me that are warring with each other. And for whatever reason, as a coping strategy for how I was raised, I wasn't able to feel certain emotions and they're coming out and wanting to be felt. Like specifically my family, there's a pattern of repressed anger. And so like I tended to get angry at those sorts of situations that are happening out there, but really like the war and everything that was making me upset was just triggering the anger inside of me that hadn't been given permission to be felt.
Yeah, that's so profound. So, Bitcoin kind of catalyzed this inner journey and all this inner work that you've done. And it's so admirable to see all this transformation that you've done. And it's so incredible to see that Bitcoin is what inspired that. And yeah, so I'm just so fascinated by your journey. Can you talk a little bit more about your personal journey? Like what what were you like before and what are you like now? What parts of yourself had to fall away? And what does your day look like now? Does your actual day look a lot different than how it would before? Or is it more just an internal way of processing things and viewing the world?
Yeah, yeah. As far as I've always been I've talked about this on some other podcasts, and like part of this, I've always been pretty anxious. I've felt pretty deeply. I'm intuitive. I'm an empath, and like I really feel my emotions, and I pick up on energy. And from a young age, I felt anxiety and had racing thoughts, and that culminated like through late middle school, high school, I had a lot of pain in the body and I played sports and like I was playing through a lot of pain. I just thought that's what everybody was doing. And now that I'm like looking back on it, it was more than just like soreness. It was a lot of the emotional like things that I hadn't, that repressed anger, for example, like causing havoc on my system, on my nervous system. And just side note, like I think that's the one piece that like Western medicine is missing. We want to look at every symptom and just assign it some scientific like direct cause and why it's happening. And that can be good, but if we don't take into account the emotional part of it and like why some of these even like physical symptoms have their roots in emotions in the body that are just trying to release, like back pain, jaw pain, all sorts of things. I think cancer, even. I'm not like a scientist, but just my own like intuition says that there's something there. But to get more to your question, yeah, like I was in sales for most of my career, 17 years in sales. And as I went through this process, yeah, I started to like reconsider what I wanted to do for a living. And that ended up culminating in me quitting my job about 6 months ago. So my days look different from that aspect. And yeah, a lot of times I was very reactive and anxious and in my own head. And I'm still like that a lot of the time. Like, you don't just reset those patterns immediately. That's like unwinding the patterns of how we live is an ongoing process. I don't think it ever ends. And the deeper you go, the more challenging and tricky it can get. But yeah, I find myself much less reactive, much more aware when I'm getting into a contracted state, like why that's happening. And I'm starting to understand it and be less reactive to it, be more loving to all the parts of myself. And that has an impact on my relationships and yeah, my day-to-day reality. I can't explain how much it's changed how I live my life. And yeah, it's quite sometimes I look back on it too and I'm like, wow, and I don't think it was all Bitcoin, don't get me wrong, but Bitcoin, for whatever reason, that paradigm shift was like what cracked me open to then have all these dominoes start falling. And as Bitcoin appreciates, it gives you more time to like dedicate to this kind of stuff if you're holding it long term. So yeah, there's a lot to it.
Yeah, you've said that the ultimate form of freedom is control over your thoughts and being able to ask the question, do I really want to be thinking about this right now? And so, how did you arrive at that insight? And what does that kind of mental sovereignty look like in your life today?
Yeah, that's a realization that took a lot of work. I would say mostly meditative work is what led me there and also understanding it. My teacher, that Thomas McConkey, who I mentioned earlier, he would talk about that all the time. Like recently I was on a 7-day silent meditation retreat and it really hit and I started to see it in my life. There's a difference between like conceptually understanding something and hearing it, like hearing a teacher say something like, "Oh, this is about freedom." And that's good. Like in our culture, we somehow think that like hearing something or repeating something intellectually makes us know it. And I would argue that's not the case. Knowing is like when the words enter into your whole system and you know it in your heart and you know it in your body and like it shows up in the way that you live. And so I had heard my teacher talk about this before. We sat there for 4 different 2-hour meditation sessions a day. So we're doing 8 hours a day and the rest of the day is in silence and we're focusing on the breath over and over again. These things that can just seem like, why are we doing this? And my teacher was like, hey, it's not that the breath itself is anything special that's unlocked. Although the breath has a lot of power, don't get me wrong, but it's not about like the breath. It's about training yourself to concentrate on what you want your attention to concentrate on. So by sitting there and saying, I'm going to focus on the breath for hours and hours, that's training concentration and power to set your intention and do it so that when you go out into the world and all of a sudden in everyday life, you have more freedom to say, what do I want to be doing right now? Do I want to be relaxing and focusing on my breath and breathing? There's a heated conversation going on right now on Twitter, on with my family, and I'm getting into it. Do I actually want to be doing that? Or am I just programmed to react a certain way and be pulled into this? So I think coming at it with intention, yeah, I want to engage in this conversation, or this actually isn't helpful for me and I don't want to. And having the willpower and the freedom to then say, no, I'm going to go over here. Or somebody said something that just upset me and it's causing me to go down this whole rabbit hole of repetitive thoughts or this negative self-talk that I get looped into. Do I want to be doing that? And do I have the freedom to say, I'm going to get my mind to shut off and I'm going to like just feel my body and I'm going to not let the mind rule me? That's a little bit about it. Yeah, and that's a lifelong task. I see it happening more and more, but I in no means have that mastered. But the more you see it, the more you're like, oh,
Mhm.
wow, this is changing how I interact in the world. And yeah, and it like to tie it back to Bitcoin, I think our existing monetary system, the incentives of everything make it so that all the products that we're building are built to just have dopamine hits and to keep us distracted and to keep us like reactive
Mhm.
and not have freedom to be like enslaved to attention. And in some way, Bitcoin flips the incentives and has a more pure system that over time, I think like switches that incentive and allows us to like really focus on the things that matter longer term, not just short term fixes.
Yeah, when you were talking about that, it also reminded me of the concept of having that space between stimulus and response,
Mm.
which Viktor
Yep.
Frankl talks about, a lot of people talk about, and how if you can appreciate that space for what it is and understand that there is a space there, stimulus does not automatically have to lead to a response in yourself. There's a
Mm.
stimulus and then there's a space. And that space is our ultimate form of freedom. If we understand that we have that freedom and if we utilize that space and recognize it. But the problem is that we don't recognize that space and we just automatically have a stimulus and it leads to response. But I've often heard many times that if you master that space, you can master your life. And in hearing you talk about it, it's incredible how Bitcoin can point you towards mastering that process and really take you out of the moment and really analyze the stimulus and then plan your response instead of just reacting.
Yeah, and it kind of goes back to this idea of time preference as well. Like Bitcoin, for whatever reason, helps you to think more beyond the initial, what do I want right now? What are these wants that I have that will make me feel good in the moment and change that for a longer term thinking? And the incentives line up to be more long-term focused and to focus on the things that over time are going to be of the most benefit. And yeah, for whatever reason, Bitcoin caused me to start like asking those types of questions. Like, what type of life do I really want? And luckily, the incentives of Bitcoin make it so that I think you can create that kind of life. Unfortunately, the existing monetary system, it you just have to be like in survival mode to keep up. And that's why we're so burnt out and overstimulated is because it takes more and more energy just to live the same kind of a lifestyle because we're just mortgaging we're mortgaging future productivity to pay for today. And so in the future, humans need to do more and more. And so, yeah, Bitcoin really enables that type of mindset.
Yeah, the most inspiring part of your story is how you actually took the leap. I know you started your company, the Liminal Leap, and you embodied that leap by moving out of your well-paying fiat job and into the unknown. And it's so inspiring to see someone make that leap. But can you talk about why you called it the liminal leap and what does liminal mean and how do you see this playing out for other individuals?
Yeah, the liminal leap, the word liminal is a space where like the old, it's this in between place where there's a lot of unknown and uncertainty. I describe it as a liminal spaces where the old has started to die or is dying or is dead, but the new hasn't emerged yet. And I felt that in my own life as I went through this pretty big identity shift and whatever it is that I went through, call it a midlife crisis, a spiritual awakening, You can make sense of it a number of different ways through a number of different models, but whatever it was, the reality was is like my identity was changing. The things that I cared about and identified with and the way I related to the world really started to change. And it felt like the death of the old me. And that's and still is. There was some mourning that happened with that, and it was tender. It was a tender process. And I could feel this new emergence of something new. And specifically when it comes to my job and my career, for a couple of years, I had started to feel, oh, like I'm in sales. I don't know that this is really motivating me or feeding me at a deep level, giving me the purpose and like the energy that I want. It seemed like the job was sucking my energy more and more. At one point it wasn't like that. It was I was excited to go and to make all this money and to do all the things. And that started to fade and I could feel a pull back to psychology and consciousness. Psychology is what I studied in college and I've always been interested in it. But I and a lot of it I think is due to the fiat system. I wanted to provide a certain kind of life and have a family and some of the jobs that for that type of a field coming out of college, I just couldn't make that kind of money, even though that was like the thing that I was really interested in, that need to make more money won out above doing something that felt deeply meaningful. And so I found myself in this space where I was like, oh, I want to quit my job, but I don't really know. I'm in this liminal space. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I can feel like deep in my body, deep in my bones, deep in my heart that there's something for me to do. So it felt like very liminal. And I find that I felt that in my personal life. And the liminal leap has become much more of a collective theme for me because I feel like the world is in one of those liminal spaces. I'm seeing it, and I think Bitcoiners are seeing it, that the old financial system, the old paradigm of centralized bodies telling us what to do and like that those governance structures, they're dying. And they're they're not dead yet, but there's no bringing them back. Like they're in hospice, in my opinion. And we're in that space where I don't know exactly what's going to be birthed. I think Bitcoin's a big part of it, some of these AI, and I think we need humans to wake up and live from a deeper place so that we can create something new. But I feel like we're in a liminal moment. The next decade is this in between profoundly disorienting space. And so, yeah, that's part of my mission. I think Bitcoiners, if we can get more Bitcoiners to wake up and to live from a really deep heart-centered, open, loving, like fierce place. And not just Bitcoiners, everybody. Like we need more of that in the world. So anyway, that's a little bit behind the liminal leap, what it means, and to be honest, I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm just throwing paint against the wall. And it's scary, but it feels right, and I know that there's something there. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for doing what you're doing because you're inspiring so many people with your journey. And when you were talking about your interest in psychology in college, that resonates deeply with me because
Ah,
when I
cool.
was a college student, I was really into psychology. And I my first year I started taking all these psych classes and I was excited to be a psych major. But very similar story to you. I had like mentors and other peers saying, "Oh, you're how are you going to make money in the psychology field? You should just be pre-med instead." And
Mm.
so exactly the same story as you. I got pulled into that fiat mindset of just the money winning out over your passion. And now it's like this Bitcoin ethos and this consciousness connection to Bitcoin and spirituality is just lighting a fire in my soul. And
Yeah.
it's
Beautiful.
yeah, I heard somebody on one of your podcasts was talking about how there's the fiat world and then the Bitcoin world. And it's hard for people to make that leap from the fiat world into the Bitcoin world because it's so unknown. But Bitcoiners are more attuned to ideas like your thoughts creating reality. And you also talk about how the new world is being built. So it was brought up that can we just manifest our own job in the Bitcoin world? Can we just manifest the job that we want? Because the job's not going to be there. So we're going to have to create it. It starts with your thoughts, and it gets back to that fire that was in your soul, the fire that I'm feeling in my soul. And to see you just manifest your job outside of the fiat world is so inspirational. Do you think that's what people are going to be able to do? Just manifest the job that they want in the Bitcoin world?
Yeah, I think that I have this belief that, and this is a deeply, whether it's spiritual or however you want to define it, but I have this view that like each of us, each person is one of one, and we each come with innate gifts and things that we offer that only we can offer and that we're good at and that we're passionate about and that can serve and do good in the world. And the fiat system, I think, stifles that. If you're ever around children, like they're so creative and they have their natural passions and interests that they just like gravitate to and they're just in a flow state. They're just doing it. And the monetary system, the way it's built, and all of the second, third, fourth order effects of the systems that are built on top of that necessarily put us into this, hey, go to school, learn these things, fit into this box, and it like suppresses that creativity and those innate gifts that we bring to the world. And then there's that aspect of you go to college, like you said, and like I said, you have the thing that like really fires you up and that you're interested in and that you'd love to work in. But because there's this inflationary system where you have to make a certain amount of money to keep up with the theft that's happening to like devalue everybody, you actually can't tap into that. And so that leads to a world where people aren't connected to a deeper purpose of what their heart like wants and really craves. And yeah, I'm optimistic that in a on a Bitcoin standard where money gets more valuable over time and we're able to actually harness the deflationary nature of technology over time, that allows more people to be living from that place. And so I think there's a couple parts to your question. Yes, one, systemically, a Bitcoin standard enables more people to do that and to like tap into what their heart wants and the gifts that they bring to the world and create work and vocation around that, where they can make the money to provide a family and provide our basic necessities and not be in this survival mode. And then two, I think the part of that, like, there's a part where if you're not in alignment and you haven't done some of that deeper inner work, then even if you're trying to manifest what you think you want, it tends to not work out as much. And it's still this like forcing where you're trying to force something. I think there's an aspect of like really getting out of your own way, getting rid of some of the conditioning, and allowing ourselves to live naturally from this deeper place. Because I have a belief that the heart knows, like it already knows exactly what it is. And sometimes the mind doesn't think that's the thing, right? And I'm going through this on my own journey. Like I'm trying a bunch of different things and seeing what like the things that my business is gravitating toward when I let it aren't the things that my mind thought it would gravitate to. So I think you have to be open to a deeper alignment and allowing, I don't know, there's this polarity between manifesting and making something happen, which I think there's total power to that. Once you want, say, I want to go do something and manifest it into the world, you absolutely can set your mind to anything. And sometimes that's coming from a place of like still woundedness and like needing to prove that I can do something. And it's coming from this deeper wounded place, maybe. But the more you get aligned to your own purpose, the more I find that things just happen. It's almost effortless. So, yeah, I think I don't know if I'm making any sense. I'm just
Yeah.
rambling, but
Yeah, no, you definitely are. You're basically talking about the process that individuals go through to get out of the mind and into the body, and how that's such an important process for this rise in consciousness and helping with self-actualization. But it also gets back
yeah.
to your theme about how that process also is what leads to the expansion of the collective consciousness. And that gets to the
Hmm.
heart of your of why you started Liminal Leap, I believe, because you understand that Bitcoiners are going to be the ones creating the future. Bitcoiners are at the forefront of this shift. And it's imperative that Bitcoiners who are leading us into this new future, this unknown future, that they operate from this new paradigm out of their mind and into their heart and into their body. And it's such a powerful concept. And you're really just changing the course of the way that the world is going to unfold. So I'm just so inspired by the work that you're doing. Can you explain a little bit about the coaching that you do and how you're getting the people that you work with to shift into this new paradigm?
Yeah, so I've got a number of elements to my business, and like I say, I'm just seeing what sticks. I'm like, people are like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I'm just doing it." Like, we're just seeing. I'm trusting that something's going to emerge. So yeah, there's one aspect to it where I'm doing some conscious leadership coaching. So working with leaders, and there's a deeper reason behind why I started with leaders. One is because another one of my mentors, John Kessler, in these like developmental psychology maps and integral theory. I don't want to get too much into the weeds of all of this, but there there's a certain stage of consciousness or perspective in consciousness where instead of being so identified with like your own ego and your own perspective and having to defend it at all costs to be right or wrong and being like really binary, like it's this or it's this, there's a stage of consciousness where you can just step back and see all of the different perspectives for what they're worth. That's not to say that you change your perspective. You still have your own perspective, but your mode of operating is detached from your own ego and your own perspective. And you can see all the perspectives. And I think that's what's missing generally in leadership. Like, I think we have a failure of leadership at a government national level where all of our leaders are still just, I'm right, you're wrong, it's blue or red, it's this or that, and it's driving polarization. So we need a critical mass of leaders that can step back and detach from that need to be right or wrong and see that there's value, and we need all the perspectives and find creative ways to like work together in love and in compassion toward everybody, even when we disagree with them, especially when we disagree with them. So yeah, that's part of the goal with the coaching, is to get more leaders to that type of a place. And a lot of that is to challenge your assumptions. So I'm not a therapist, but I have enough of a psychology background that my coaching is like therapy light, where I'm not diagnosing or like treating any mental illnesses, but we're doing some of that deeper inner work to say, let's maybe challenge some of your assumptions about like why you keep seeing the same patterns at work, why maybe you're leading from a place that needs control and you're like micromanaging, or how you tend to avoid conflict and that leads to more conflict in the workplace. Like those
Mm,
types of things
mm.
is the type of work that I'm doing. And it's not a one size fits all program. It's different for each person based on what they need. But yeah, I'm working with a number of leaders on that. And then some of the other stuff that I'm working on, I'm actually, I'll keep you posted on this, but in 2 weeks, I'm launching a beta cohort or group of Bitcoiners where we're doing a group experience where we're overlaying the Bitcoiner journey with the consciousness journey. And we'll be doing some of that deeper inner work as a group. And it's kind of part like structured and part just like letting the group emerge together and like connecting and allowing us to see what we do together. So I'm testing that out, and if it goes well, I might do a more formal offering of that where it's like an 8 week type program where we meet once a week. And there's some other avenues, but those are the things that I'm excited about at the moment.
Yeah, that sounds super exciting. I would love to be a part of that. A part of that.
Yeah, I'll
Um,
keep you posted. I envision a world where in a couple of months I launch something more formal, and yeah, would love to
yeah,
explore it with you.
yeah. And I was watching one of the podcasts you were on, and you got into this discussion about how Bitcoin is intangible and how that is something that is not appreciated as much as it should, because a lot of people actually take the argument that, oh, Bitcoin is not tangible, so therefore it doesn't have value. But you made the argument that it was actually the opposite. It's that intangible nature. It ties back into this connection with consciousness, because you said that as we expand our consciousness, the objects of awareness become more subtle and less concrete. And that was such a profound concept to me. Can you expand upon that?
Yeah, there's a lot to that question. I'm just trying to think through like how best to synthesize it. When it comes to development, these developmental models, like early childhood and teenager kind of development, the only capacity that younger people like that have the ability to do is to engage with concrete objects and toys, things in the physical world. And that at a certain stage of development, usually around 18 to 21, like somewhere in that range in healthy development, the objects in your awareness become more subtle. So instead of just like talking about a toy or a ball, you can now like make an object out of your own thinking and you can think about your own thinking, right? So just in that respect, like as you make a jump up to a more mature development, the things that you're able to think about, like your thinking isn't a concrete object. It's just, but you can deconstruct it and start to say, I say this, I can reason and start to do con more deep thinking and contrasting ideas. And then at this further stages of development and more mature consciousness, these objects become even more subtle. And we start to realize that there's so much more. The human capacity of the five senses, we think that's all there is. And there's so many more capacities that like we're just not tuned into that. And that's where like people start to get into these more mystical like stages and higher stages of consciousness and they get these like intuitive downloads where they just see a vision of something fully formed and they just know it in their whole body and it takes them like 10 years to bring it into reality and there's no way to scientifically measure or say what happened there but and I think as we get more advanced in our science, we'll be able to start measuring that. But you can say that something, if something has to be tangible for us to know that it exists, but take, for example, love. Is love tangible? No, but all we have to do to see that love is a real thing is to look at a child who is raised with love versus a child who's not, and tell me that's not real.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Bitcoin, the fact that it's funny, some people make the argument that it's not tangible. And I actually think it's a profound, it is tied to real world resources because it takes energy to mine it. So I think that it's bounded by energy, where Jeff Booth talks about it being bounded by energy. That's really important. And the fact that you can't touch it has profound implications. And some of the most real things and the most important things I don't think are perceptible to the basic five human senses.
Yeah, this is the part that just absolutely blows my mind about Bitcoin. And it relates directly to spirituality and consciousness and the quantum realm. And you made reference to the fact that the physical world is just 0.001% of all reality. The other 99.999% is these frequencies, energies, and vibrations. And you're exactly right. We have such limited understanding of this 99.99%, and we get so focused on that 0.001%. And I think that's what Satoshi, the brilliance of what Satoshi discovered is he tapped into these other realms and he was able to bring something out of those other realms and anchored it into the physical realm through the mining process. And it's such a crazy concept how by touching Bitcoin and owning Bitcoin, you're essentially owning something from these other realms. You're owning truth, you're owning absolute scarcity. And they're things that are supposed to be infinite concepts, but yet by owning Bitcoin, you're essentially owning a percentage of an infinite concept. And I think that's why a lot of Bitcoiners intuitively understand that what we're holding is just you can't put a price on it. It has no price.
Yeah, yeah, it's so like mind blowing and
Yeah.
yeah, we're there's just so much more going on
Yeah.
than what we can begin to comprehend. And yeah, you mentioned these other realms. I think you probably listened to the podcast. I think the one with Cole Walmsley is the one that
Yeah.
you were talking about. And yeah, like this gets a little bit mystical and out there. I have to be careful with saying it, but you mentioned these other realms, and I don't know this for a fact. I don't know. I'm just making things up, but the more I go into it, the more like the idea that we're the only like intelligent life in the universe is just, I know people get scared that there's other life out there, but everything points to there being just so much more, and the universe is so much more vast, and there's so much more going on. I think there's much more and other realms that we can't really tap into. Yeah, you mentioned Bitcoin like tapping into some of these other realms, and I think it's entirely possible that Satoshi himself or themselves like originates from some other realm that's trying to help humanity to evolve. I don't know. That could just be me making things up, but and I'm totally speculating here. But the deeper I go and the more experience I have with things that don't make sense to the logical mind, the more that type of possibility opens up to me.
Yeah. When you talked about that on that podcast, that was mind blowing. How, because there's the concept of how the energies need to balance each other out, and we live in such a hyper entropic world. So potentially Satoshi comes from this counter entropic realm that balances out our hyper entropic realm. And yeah, when I heard you talking about that, my mind was just absolutely blown.
I was excited someone I was like I was just excited someone wanted to talk about it with me because most of the time when I bring something up like that, it's kind of you're out there, and I'm like, yeah, you're right. I'm out there, but it feels right. Yeah.
That's what is incredible about some of the advances that we're having now as our technology advances. We can actually learn more about these other worlds. So it's actually not that far out there. We know about the quantum model of reality, and we know that there's infinite possibilities, and it's yeah, it's the physical world. It really is 0.001%. So how can you not be open to these ideas?
Yeah. Yeah, and I get it. Like some of these ideas shatter your
Yeah,
paradigm,
yeah,
and like the assumptions, the things that you would have to let go of to be open to them are, and I'm sure there's plenty of things that I'm not open to. Like even just if I want to get really vulnerable here in the spirit of this conversation, like even Bitcoin, I'm quite convinced on Bitcoin. And I've been challenged lately with some of the most evolved people that I've met, like from a consciousness perspective. And they understand Bitcoin on some level. And like they're challenging me by saying, yeah, but it's still based on this like idea of scarcity, and there's this whole other world of abundance. And I'm really convinced on Bitcoin actually that like hearing those types of people and then me like re-evaluating my conviction has given me more conviction actually. But the point here is that we're talking about binary thinking, and that there's an either or way and there's a higher way that goes beyond binaries. So I think Bitcoin is a massive tool for humanity and for us to take this next step. And I think sometimes we fall into the trap of Bitcoin becoming the new religion. And everything is just this constructed idea. And some ideas are more useful than others, but at some point, even Bitcoin has to be transcended. And it's not just about Bitcoin, it's about what it enables. And I don't get me wrong, I think Bitcoin's here to stay, and I think it's an important part of the next probably 200 years at least for humanity. And there's more above and beyond it. Just my own, what else do I not see right now? If I look back 10 years ago, I had blinders on, and everything that I see points to the fact that type of paradigm shift continues on always. And so, like, how as Bitcoiners can we still be open to new ideas where we might be getting entrenched into like binary thinking? I don't know. That's been on my mind lately.
yeah, yeah. I love the way that you think about things because yeah, we have to question our beliefs. We can't just blindly think that Bitcoin is the savior, not question it. So yeah, it's important for Bitcoiners to think about these things because yeah, our we do actually play such a huge role in what Bitcoin becomes. So we can't just sit back and watch it unfold, we're going to play such a crucial role. So if we start
Yeah.
to engage in this binary thinking, then we're not really making any improvements on the current paradigm. The whole thing about bumping up to the new paradigm is questioning your beliefs and not engaging in that binary thinking.
Yeah, and if we like really start to tap into this whole idea, you talked about the individual mirroring the collective, and this idea, and this is becoming much more real to me that like when we say if you want to understand the world and the universe, understand yourself, my own system is like billions of little cells that when there's sickness and fragmentation, it's creating a system that's like not operating well. It's operating in anxiety and fear. There's these parts inside myself that are like warring with each other. And if you look at the world as just like one collective body and we're all these little cells working together as one, like that's where I think there is a reality to there is no separation. Like we are all one. We're all part of this one organism. But if we're constantly like fighting against each other and creating all these borders and boundaries, it just creates a system that's sick and that's in pain. And so the more we can come together, and the implications of that can be challenging because that means, oh, we have to embrace everybody and all their perspectives, even the shitcoiners, and we need to have love and compassion and see what value they have to offer. I don't know, I've been challenged by this. Some Bitcoiners don't like that idea, and I don't want to get like super binary because there is a time and a place to like use those type of tactics to get people to see things. And sometimes it is okay to use that type of messaging. But I think as Bitcoiners, we have an opportunity to like upshift the way we orange pill people and not have it be in this place that's like coming from a condescending place and a place that's rooted in just us wanting to feel right.
Yeah, that's so beautifully said. And it relates to, you've made mention of this idea of decentralized spirituality or decentralized
Mm.
consciousness, and how it's important for us to view the Bitcoin network as not just this Bitcoin network, but actually a network into consciousness. And instead of just being plugged into these institutions that tell us what we should think and how we should act, we should tap into our own node and listen to our own discernment. And we are actually tapped into something that's aligned with the universal laws as opposed to these artificial fiat systems. So why are we outsourcing everything to these artificial systems when we have this natural system that we're rooted in? And that also was such a powerful concept. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, there's, in my opinion, like decentralization is a theme and it's developmental in nature. I think it's part of the shift that we're upshifting into as humanity. At a certain level or perspective, you want to outsource to have authority tell you what to do. And we need that. Growing up, like you need people to like give you rules and give you structure, and you need to have that to form a healthy foundation before going out and trusting your own intuition and like seeing the rules are important, but maybe sometimes we can bend the rules a little bit. There's more to it. And so, yeah, a lot of developmentally society, I think, has in many ways we've outsourced. We want a government to tell us what to do, how to live, what's good. We want a religion to tell us what the rules are, and we want to outsource that as there's some intermediary that's speaking to tell us what's right and wrong. And I think there's wisdom there. And yeah, when you start to see Bitcoin as there's all these nodes on the network, and it's important for you to run your own node because you need to verify for yourself. And anything I'm saying in this podcast or anything that I say ever, don't take my word for it. Go test it out yourself and find out for yourself. Try some of it and see what resonates and what doesn't resonate. Like you have my full permission to throw it out. Like all good with me. But Bitcoin, yeah, like plugging into a node on the network to like plug into this protocol and verify consensus with all these other nodes on the network who aren't trusting a bank that has the ledger or the record or a government who we have to trust that they're playing by the rules and aren't going to change the rules to affect us. I think that has deeper implications. So, yeah, when it comes to like spirituality, I see a trend when it comes to religion where younger people don't want to be told what spirituality looks like or that following these rules makes you like a holy person, and they want to directly experience it. And I'm not bagging on like traditional religion. I think it's cool and I think it's valuable, and there's culture there and there's community. And like we are the nodes on the network. We are the supercomputer. Like we are the technology. And when we talk about these five senses, that's what I'm talking about. When you start to do some of this deeper work and tap into some of these deeper capacities that I think all humans have the capacity to do and to tap into, that we're just not tapping into because of a number of different reasons in our evolution or how society works, you can start to learn that, like, now I can trust my own inner knowing and I can know something through my own direct experience, and I don't have to outsource that to anybody else. And we're all connected to source, whether that's God, whether that's the universe, like whatever you call it, we're connected to something deeper. And when you start to experience that and find that, like, you have capacities that you can trust yourself, that has big implications. And I think the future of spirituality is, I'm really excited to see where it goes. Yeah.
Yeah, that is so deep. Thank you. And another really powerful thing that you talk about is this parallel between Bitcoin's price action and the spiritual path, and how you get these dramatic expansions and contractions. So, why is this up and down dynamic so central to both personal and collective evolution?
Yeah. Expansion and contraction, it's a deep, it's found everywhere in everything that lives. Everything that's alive is constantly expanding and contracting. You see it in the birthing process. That's such a beautiful process, right? Like the body contracts as a woman is in labor and having a baby. There's these deep contractions that are like really disturbing and challenging for the body, and pain, right? And causes the system all this. But that's what allows to push and then to have this expansive, like an opening, and then it contracts back and allow expansion. And contraction is in the very fiber of like how humans are brought into the world. And then as we breathe, like deep inside the womb, like a baby is breathing, it's in and out, it's contracting, it's expanding. And then at every moment, the breath, we're expanding, we're contracting, and the contraction is what allows the expansion. And at some point, like even that distinction falls away if you really meditate enough and you start to try to figure out, like, where does the out breath end and the in breath begin? That's a practice you can do as you meditate. Try to get really clear. Where's the moment where the one ends and the other begins? And the more you start to tap into it, like you realize it's just one thing. It's just the idea of expansion and contraction is just an idea that they're two separate things and it's just one process. But the contraction allows for expansion. And I had followed Bitcoin on the charts since I got into it like after the dip of 2018, after the bull run up to 20K. I got in after it dipped back down. And then I started to follow Bitcoin I got into it, I started to study it. And as you watch the price action, like it's really volatile. And at first it's like really disturbing that it's volatile. Oh, you're freaking out at it, right? Oh no, I'm losing. And you start to get emotional. But the more you watch it, the patterns, like it, if you zoom out, it's pretty up and to the right over time. But over the short period, it's volatile. Like it'll break out really high and then it'll crash back down. But then slowly, like it recalibrates at this new equilibrium and this new baseline that like there's support there and it's not going to crash back down. So I'd been watching that on the chart for a number of years. And then as I studied these developmental psychology models And then more importantly, as I experienced it in my own life, like all of a sudden I have this big breakthrough and my world changes and it's expansive and everything's beautiful and peaceful and I'm like feeling all these positive emotions and I'm just like, this is amazing. Life is so good. And then a couple of weeks later, it's like the crash comes and you contract back down. The old patterns start showing up again, and my body hurts, and like my mind's racing, trying to make sense of what the hell is happening to me. Like it's a massive contraction. And I think that's the way humans develop too. Like we don't just like smoothly ascend. If you zoom out, like we're growing. And part of the growth process is being able to like contract and expand. And so I think it's an archetypal pattern that happens. Something new doesn't emerge without inherent volatility, and the more you start to learn to be with the contraction and welcome it, the contraction is what allows the next expansion because as you come down, as Bitcoin crashes down, there's enough buyers that it settles at this new baseline, and then the supply crunch happens and it can shoot up again eventually. And that's the same thing with our growth. Like it takes a little bit to recalibrate to a new baseline. And yeah, overlaying it to the world and the collective, I think the next 10 years are going to be a little bit choppy, a lot of bit choppy, pretty volatile. Yeah, and I'm aware of the earthquake last night that hit. I've been spending this morning contemplating what that looks like because I think there's patterns there too. Like when your world gets shattered and you have this new paradigm, it's almost like a tectonic shift. And then it has aftershocks and it takes some time to settle into this new territory before it like calms down.
Nice. That's deep. I can't wait for you to do a blog post on it. I feel a blog post coming out of that concept.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be next. I think it's next
Yeah.
week's newsletter.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was spending some time on that this morning.
We talk about Bitcoin adoption happening gradually and then suddenly. And so, do you think that same concept is happening with awakening on a global scale?
I
Are we
do.
are we seeing the early signs of this consciousness renaissance? And in the same way that
Yeah,
like you and I have had this kind of 0 to 1 moment where we realized that this whole paradigm shift, it sounds like you've had an even deeper experience than me and a lot of people. But imagine when society has that 0 to 1 paradigm shift. And are we gradually and suddenly, are we close to that?
yeah. I spent a lot of time last week. I'm not sure if you read my most recent newsletter, but it came out. What was that? Yesterday.
Yeah, yeah. I
I
loved
spent
it. It
a
was great.
week. I spent a week in the mountains
Yeah.
last week, and I was really struck at nature. Like I spend a lot of time outside and consciously was just trying to open up to like nature and what does it have to teach us and to teach me. And the first part of the week, I was really struck just at how nature takes a lot of time to evolve. There's this long process, and like the world that we're living on, when it's viewed through like human time and linear time, like the process for these things to evolve and for those tectonic plates to move to form mountains, like that happens so slowly over time. So there's a gradual process to evolution that moves really slow. And I think sometimes in this modern world, we expect everything really fast. And I know that's been my case as I like am doing a lot of inner work. Like I want it to happen faster. There's this natural tendency to like, I expect all of these things to go away, all of these patterns and like this. I just expect, oh, I've had this change and I want it to like just immediately be instant. That's not the case with development. And so I was just really contemplating that the first half of the week, like just patience and gradual development. You can't expect to evolve so fast. And then toward the end of the week, I started to realize that there are these moments how nature expands gradually, and then boom, a massive earthquake or a volcano eruption, like all of that's been building up gradually and gradually suddenly re-changes everything. And the cascading effects into the environment are crazy. I talked about like a bamboo shoot. there can be like tons of growth underneath and you don't think it's growing, and then boom, it shoots up like 90 feet in a matter of weeks. So I see it in nature. There's gradual, slow development. And I think us as humans, we sometimes expect growth to happen faster than it does in nature. And I think we have to be ready for those suddenly moments. And I do think we are, I don't know, I don't want to make any specific predictions as far as what that looks like, but I think the next decade or so are going to be full of sudden moments. My intuition that there's going to be 500 years of growth in 10 years, something like that, maybe more,
Wow.
as far as what our mind can process. So yeah, I think growth happens gradually until all of a sudden it's sudden. And that's, I've seen that in my own life, like years and years of tons of work, and then boom, a paradigm shift that changes everything. And then it takes time to integrate that and to figure out what it means. So yeah, Bitcoin is one part of it, and we need a lot for I think the universe and evolution is asking us to step up in a different way and to live in ways that we haven't before.
Yeah, thank you so much for talking about this concept of expansion and contraction and growth not being linear. Because for me, that's very comforting and it allows me to relax into the process a lot more and not
Yeah.
get so frustrated.
Yeah,
I'm
amazing.
very grateful that you introduced that concept.
Yeah, let
Uh,
me just take it. Let's take a breath with that one. We can just relax and trust
yeah,
the process,
yeah,
right? Yeah, I like
yeah.
that. Thanks for
Thank,
saying that.
no, yeah, thank you for all these profound ideas. It's really touching me on a very deep level, and I can tell it's gonna the stuff that you're teaching is really going to help me on the path forward as well. So I have massive appreciation for what you're doing. You also have this quote about enlightenment is closer than close. So what keeps us from realizing how close it is, and how does Bitcoin help us realize how close it is?
Yeah, the statement that comes to mind, and I think where I usually go with that one is Jesus came out of the 40 days in the mountains, or 40 days of fasting and in isolation. And at least the way the Bible describes it in the translations that we have, he said that the kingdom of heaven is at hand. And that's what I think he was pointing to, is that it's all right here. It's all already here. I think every promise that Jesus was talking about was pointing to something right now, a reality right now, that if we just open up to it, that like it's right here. And once you start to see it, you realize that it's always already been here, and that there is this connection to the divine and to everything that's like connecting us all together. And it's all this beautiful process. And yeah, I think that's what he was saying. Like, it's closer than close. And like, it's already right here. It's already happening. But there's this tendency to like, and I see it in most my own religious upbringing. I'll just give you an example. There's this idea, and I'm not discounting it. There's some truth to some perfection in the future, right? There's some far off thing out there right now as pain, suffering, we're sinful, this idea that everything's bad right now. And like at some future time, like way out there after this life, at some future time, like there will be perfection and there will be all this happily ever after. And I'm not discounting, I think there's plenty to look forward to, but time also is like this whole other rabbit hole of is it even real? And all there ever is right now. But yeah, there's a more radical reality to like everything that all of the wise ones have been talking about when we tend to say, oh, yeah, out there, sometime in the future. I think there's a deeper reality to all of it, and that's all available to us right now, and that there's an innate perfection despite all of the challenge for what we're living in. And when you open up to it, you realize that it's always been here all along. We were blind to it. And you start to see the whole world through new eyes and experience everything through a different lens. And yeah, it's almost like you wear glasses, right? When you get, or when you first got glasses and you get a new prescription and like you're looking around at the world, just holy cow, like the leaves and the mountains and just like the detail. That's what I compare it to. I think the reality of what we're experiencing, sometimes we get blinded to. And then when you have this new perspective, it's wow, there's so much crispness and beauty, and it's all right here. It's right now. It's beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. You're helping guide me a little bit closer. I can feel it because what you're talking about and what a lot of spiritual masters talk about is the power of now. Like basically what Eckhart Tolle talks about. It's all about the
Hmm.
now. The future doesn't exist. The past doesn't exist. It's all about this moment. And it reminds me of your awakening moment that you described when reading that book, The Science of Enlightenment. And what you described is basically getting a way to get into the present moment by just feeling your current senses in the moment. If you're just feeling the senses, you don't have time to create stories about the past or project into the future. And another one of the profound things you talk about is how the self is a story. And do you feel like that's related to being able to live in the present moment by not telling stories about yourself or not telling stories about what's unfolding in front of you and just fully getting immersed into your senses?
Yeah, this the whole aspect, and that's there's so much here in this question. We're always going to have stories. That's what the mind does, is it creates stories. So I don't want to vilify the stories that we make. They serve a purpose and they're useful. And at a certain stage, you start to open up to the fact that, oh, like everything that I sit and tell myself is just a story that I'm making up. And it has usefulness and it has value. But just that realization of it, oh, that's just a story. And like the question becomes, who's the one making up the story? Who's the one observing all of it? Who's the one that's been changing over time? If my identity is now different than it was 20 years ago or 10 years ago, and the things that I identified with continued to shift, like what was it that was aware of all of that the whole time? And who am I? I'm more than just the whole story that I've made up about myself, that I'm a salesperson, that I'm an athlete, that I'm a football fan, that I'm a dad, that I'm like, sure, all of those things are true. And there's so much more to this reality of the depths of who I am and who we are. So it's the disillusion of the ego. And that's another stage of development. And it's can be pretty earth-shattering. I know it like knocked me off my feet. It's been a 12 round fight to try to figure out what's going on. And it's been amazing, but it can lead to some profound disorientation. Yeah, any follow-up questions to that? I know you have
Yeah.
a number of questions in there, but
And
that's what
also,
was
I want to
coming to
be
me.
respectful of your time. I know we're getting in there, but
Yeah,
yeah.
I have to go at the in
Yeah. Okay.
yeah, 7 minutes or so.
But yeah, what you said also reminds me of something profound that you said about how this journey of awakening is the most exhilarating thing you can imagine, but it's also incredibly disorienting. And it sounds like such a beautiful concept, just how exhilarating juxtaposed with the disorientation. Yeah.
Yeah, I find that most of the most mature spirituality or higher teachings are riddled with paradox. They're seemingly like contradictory things that can't coexist together, at least to the human binary mind that operates on ones and zeros. And so, yeah, that's the mark of, in my opinion, true spirituality is be able to embrace paradox and sit with it and have it be like you don't need to reconcile it, and you start to realize that like these opposites are just the same thing. They have to exist, and there's so much more to life than this way or that way. Like we can make space for all sorts of options and possibilities. And yeah, that's disorienting. And I think the quote you're referring to, it's from that same book, The Science of Enlightenment. Shinzen Young, if you haven't read it, I recommend it. He says that, yeah, and I think he uses the term enlightenment, which depending on who, what teacher, that can be a loaded term and you can define it different ways. And he just said the way he defines enlightenment, what he's talking about is enlightenment or awakening is simultaneously the most exhilarating and devastating thing that can happen to a person. And a lot of it is because you're opening up to fully feeling and fully experiencing life exactly as it is. I'm not resisting anything. I'm open to being this vulnerable human being and living from an open heart. That is, when you're living from an open heart, you're opening yourself up to heartbreak and you see the things in the world and it is heartbreaking. And you're open to feeling that. You're committed to feeling the good. And when the good happens and these positive emotions come, you're open and you're committed to feeling it. You let yourself fully feel it. And you realize that's going to pass and you're not going to cling to it. And that's exhilarating because you start to feel more openness, the peace, the beauty, the amazing reality of the world we live in, and that you're on the other side of the world and we're sitting here having this conversation. It's amazing. And the more awakened and enlightened you become, the more sensitive you are to all the devastating things in the world. And you open yourself up to this. If you really pay attention to it, I'm disturbed so many times every day. And if I open up to that disturbance and commit to feeling it, it's intense. It's intense in the body. There's fear, there's anger, there's shame, there's sadness, there's all of these things. And opening up yourself to feel that can be devastating, but you can't have the one without the other. And so the more you're opening up to truly live from a deeper place, you're committing to life exactly as it is. And when pain comes, I can notice that there's a tendency to want to resist it, but the more I open up to it, the more I'm able to live and the more I'm able to have compassion and live from a deep place. Yeah, it's a wild ride.
Yeah, I think that was an incredible note to end on. Thank you for that really honest, raw depiction of what you've been going through. And then
Yeah, thank you. It's been amazing.
thank you for all of the nuggets that you've dropped and all of the work that you've been doing. Can't wait to see where you go with this journey and can't wait to work with you personally as well.
Yeah, appreciate
Yeah.
it. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Have a good day.
You finished recording or
Let me stop now.
cool? Yeah, I have a couple minutes.
Okay.
My wife does have an appointment to get to, so I
Okay.
gotta go get with the kids.
I hope that you enjoyed this episode of The Signal. In a world drowning in noise, signal is everything. Most people are overwhelmed, distracted, and deceived, not because they lack intelligence, but because they've lost the ability to discern what truly matters. But signal cuts through the noise. And Bitcoin is pure signal. It doesn't promise. It doesn't lie. It doesn't bend to opinion or propaganda. It just is. And as the world descends into even more chaos, distraction, and distortion, your ability to identify signal, to recognize what's real, true, and timeless, will be one of your greatest assets. So stay sharp, stay sovereign, stay tuned, because here on The Signal, we don't follow trends, we follow truth. I'm Dr. Satoshi, and in a world of noise, we are the signal.